In 2010, it was my grandma's birthday, and I had one job, to deliver a short message for a birthday video that my dad was putting together. The twist? I don't speak the language that I was being asked to deliver this message in. So, being a 2-year-old, you can imagine just how eloquently I was able to deliver this speech. And this is what ended up being in the final video. Listen, I understand enough Hindi to know that tutli kya hoone doesn't mean anything. It isn't an existing phrase. And I messed up so badly that to this day, no one can understand what it was I was trying to say. My sister and I each had to present our pieces in Hindi because my grandma doesn't understand English, but she does understand Hindi. And my parents both thought, living all the way in Hong Kong, it would be nice for our grandma to see her 2 granddaughters speaking in a language she's familiar with, since both of our mother tongues are completely separate from hers. The reason why I shared this little story with you today relates to what I'm here to talk to you all about being the wrong kind of bilingual. Language is the most defining aspect of an individual's identity because it doesn't just allow us to communicate with each other, but it allows us to communicate connection to the people around us. So, when an individual speaks multiple languages, the way connection gets communicated gets way more complicated. It's such an experience. There's a certain prestige that comes with being bilingual, but at the same time, a lot of us cultural chameleons end up feeling like we don't belong anywhere. My mom is Malayali and my dad is Odia, and both of them speak around 5 Indian languages. My sister speaks 2 Indian languages, Odia and Hindi. Sadly, Malayalam wasn't spoken in my household growing up because from a young age, my mom moved to Odisha, where my dad is from, and so it was never needed in my household to be spoken. However, I didn't pick up any of those languages. The languages I did pick up, they were compulsory for me to learn in school, English and Chinese. All of the languages I just mentioned don't intersect, so my connection in each of those groups that did speak a language got kinda tethered, and I ended up feeling like I don't belong anywhere. One of my close friends picks up languages like Pokemon. She speaks English and Spanish and Korean and Italian. She knows Japanese. She can recognize Chinese. And up until recently, she was learning Latin. It's like she sees a language in the wild, picks it up, adds it to her Pokedex, and calls it a day. In that sense, I'm her polar opposite. I remember in Hong Kong that the international community wasn't the most international. All the kids in my grade were Chinese or Cantonese, with maybe 6 diverse students, 2 of whom were not white, me and another kid. So my exposure to diverse languages and diversity was very limited. Being so different in that kind of a community definitely takes a toll on you. Because when all of your perfect classmates are excelling with perfect Chinese, perfect English, perfect handwriting, and you and the other 5 kids are dumped in a smaller language class, that sense of othering gets amplified. All of my classmates, my perfect classmates, could never really relate to me or my experiences. I never got any cute pet names or nicknames because my existing name gave me enough individuality that I didn't need one. I remember visiting India, I experienced the same sense of foreignness I experienced in Hong Kong, just on the opposite end of the spectrum. The kind of social EQ I had developed at school had to be switched off, and I'd have to switch on a much more quiet version of me that didn't really speak unless as a response or a comment. And this kind of foreignness did hurt, because not belonging within your family one-ups not belonging within your friends 10 to 1. When I was younger, it was okay that I couldn't really speak Odia because I didn't have as much to contribute in conversations. And as long as I could communicate with those who I absolutely needed to, there wasn't much of a problem. But as I started growing more mature, it started turning into an issue. And being singled out as the child who couldn't speak Odia felt more and more like I was just a disappointment and should just stop trying to belong. Maybe I couldn't learn Odia because it was some sort of nonverbal protest against the people who othered me when I was a kid. Maybe it was the clash of cultures and having a weird mix of both at home. Maybe it was me trying to find the easy way out and thinking that I had to choose between the prevalent languages in my life. Who knows? When it comes down to it, it comes down to me giving up on being able to belong to my people through language. In Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, he talks about how he and his mom had to learn a lot of African languages to survive in South Africa. Trevor literally avoided getting mugged by gangsters because he spoke the same language as them. He established a common sense of belonging, so he was able to convince them to let him go. When I'm traveling in India with my family, and we're buying goods in a shop or we're hailing a cab, I have one job, and it's to not talk at all. See, I sound foreign, so if I'm heard, we end up paying double. And I'm no stranger. I know how foreign I sound. It took me 2 months to convince my childhood best friend that I wasn't an American. She could not believe that I was an Indian. But it goes both ways. I remember in class one time, I was just using a little Hindi slang with my friend in a conversation. And this guy, I guess he's overhearing us and he doesn't realize I know a little Hindi. And he goes, "You speak Hindi? Ew, you sound so whitewashed." And I remember my 2 classmates sitting next to me were like, "Don't worry, Arshi, just ignore him. This is exactly why I don't speak Hindi either. It's too humiliating." This is it. This is the whole story. This is why so many third culture kids are so disconnected with their languages. While I was reading Born a Crime, I both really resonated with the content and also felt super uncomfortable with the idea that we are perceived by the languages we share. Because I like to think I'm like the coined term cultural chameleon. Like a chameleon, I've been adapting to my environment my whole life, trying to belong somewhere, anywhere. But I guess with language, it overwhelmed me to another degree. I think it was a part of my lizard brain that convinced me it was better not to speak if what I spoke would embarrass me and humiliate me more. I mean, I was already being ridiculed for both being too brown and not brown enough. While I was writing this, I felt all those eyes watching me, whispering about me, making me feel humiliated. And I was remembering my judgy relatives with their painfully specific stares, the slight head tilt, and the squint, before turning to my parents and being like, "Oh, she doesn't speak Odia? Oh, Angrezi?" Oh, I complained about it, and I grumbled, and I whined to my parents, and I kept trying to find a reason why. Why don't I speak Odia? Why couldn't I just get over my linguistic barriers? Why am I the wrong kind of bilingual? What kind of precedent am I setting for future generations by not belonging? What kind of legacy am I carrying with me? Who am I if I don't even belong somewhere through how I speak? But they all told me that it's just the way it happened to be, and I can change the way I let it affect me if I just change the way I view things. See, everyone perceives me differently, and how I communicate is ultimately the first thing people notice me by. But I'm starting to realize lately that language is just one way we communicate with each other. I was stuck in this paradigm that nationality equals language equals identity equals belonging. But it's not all about how someone perceives you. It's not all about izzat or log kya kahenge. It's about how someone recognizes you and resonates with you. Like a kaleidoscope, I'm still learning to navigate through my life and my circumstances. But as my life gains new experiences and new colorful shapes to reflect, it grows more complex and yet prettier at the same time. And it's up to me to recognize that beauty. I guess I've been searching my entire life for somewhere to belong, that I'm finally starting to realize I don't need to belong fully anywhere to still belong. Whenever I used to visit India, I have a younger cousin who's my family's immediate neighbor too. We both are super close, even though he doesn't speak any English, because we both love playing games. When all the cousins would get together and we'd all play hide and seek, I used to follow him to wherever he'd hide because he had the best hiding spots. And I didn't need to tell him, he just knew I could keep a lookout. And every round we'd play, we'd win. No talking was necessary. On my mom's side, my aunt's now 9-year-old son also doesn't really speak English. But he communicates his love to me by showing me how to download the most fun car racing games. He'd take his time playing each level, and then he'd get stuck. He'd start getting frustrated, at which point he'd give me the phone, I'd complete the level for him and give it back to him so he could keep playing. No talking was necessary. I remember after hours at Hong Kong, in my mom's classroom, sometimes the amas would come and I would have conversations with them. I would muster up whatever Chinese I could to talk to them, and in return they'd talk to me with whatever English they could manage. My grandma has been the one in my family to place a lot of pressure on me for my linguistic barriers. But we've always been able to relate to each other through food and cooking. See, since I was 5, she'd give me this little mortar and pestle, and whatever she was cooking up, she'd give me her scraps. Then I would just mash it in the little mortar and pestle and have so much fun. And she'd lie to my face telling me she cooked up whatever I'd mashed into whatever she was making, and she'd tell me that's why it tastes so good. She's been one of my main reasons for my interest in cooking. Little moments like that require few words, and yet connection was communicated nonetheless. See, I can control who I feel connected to because how I communicate my connection is more important than the medium I choose to do it in. Finally, and the point of me sharing all my life stories and my languages is simply to say you shouldn't be ashamed of what your circumstances have led you to become. See, you belong to the people who've influenced you into who you are today. They've accepted you for who you are, and it would be selfish to think you don't belong to them. Belonging isn't something you can measure. It's an emotion. It's not something that defines your success. It's not something that can be achieved. It's human nature, and you can't search for it. You can feel it. At the end of the day, my grandma probably didn't understand what tutli kya hune meant. But she understood that at the end of the day, I just wanted to say I love you. Thank you.